don't think I forgot about this series. I am back. I'm back and badder than ever. And by that I mean I'm in the shirt I slept in, I just woke up, my hair's a mess, and we're gonna film this. I had a bite, I drank something, and so now we're gonna attempt to film this video. And luckily, it's only one episode, not like last time when I did two. So we're gonna be talking about Heated Rivalry Episode 3, Hunter. That's right, baby. We got a Scott Hunter episode. We are very much splitting this series down in half. We have 6 episodes. The first 3 are introduction, and these next few we're really gonna see some character development. So let's dive into it. So even before we get into the episode, the little previously on Heated Rivalry, it's all about Scott. That's immediately when I first watched the episode, it literally just said episode 3, it didn't have a title on it, and so I watched that and I immediately was like, okay, we got a Scott Hunter episode. And the episode starts in 2014 at the Sochi Olympics, where Scott and his friend are walking down. They see Shane in the cafe. They walk in, and that's where Shane's like, oh, do you want to come see my friend rhythm skate or whatever? And Scott's friend is like, he's brave for doing that, I'm assuming your friend's gay, it's not safe over here. And we immediately see on Scott's face that he's in thought about something, he's thinking about something. And that's immediately when I knew Scott. By the way, I forgot to put this in, by the way, I'm reviewing this as someone who has not read any of the books. And this show is my first perception of any of this world, universe. So that's immediately when I knew Scott was gay. And so we go back, I have my notes right here. We go back to 4 months ago, and Scott is on the run, and he's listening to people talk about him. This hockey season has not been Scott's best. We're hearing all this stuff about how he's missed and he's barely scored anything. He's rusty, and people are doubting him because he's been chosen to lead Team USA in the Olympics. And so Scott rips out his headphones and he realizes he's at this smoothie cafe. He walks in, and that is where we meet our other character, Kip. Kip is a aspiring art student, and he works at the smoothie shop. By the way, throughout this whole interaction, I knew the actor who plays Scott, I don't know how to pronounce his name, is a beautiful man. That man is so majestic. It's a beautiful man, I just need to say that. But tension is immediately there. Scott is like, what's good? And Kip is just a bunch of smoothies with deep names that have no meaning. And so Kip was Scott asks him about this blue moon over the something smoothie, and Kip is like, oh, it's good, but I always add a banana in it. And then Scott is like, oh wow, you're crazy like that or whatever. And Kip's like, would it be the first time someone's told me that? And the tension is there, I can feel it. So Kip starts making Scott his smoothie, and throughout this they keep looking at each other. Scott will be on his phone, look up, and then Kip will be making his smoothie and look over, and it's cliche, quickly looks away. You can tell Kip is immediately in love with this man by the way he keeps eyeing him or whatever. And so Scott leaves, gives Kip a big generous tip. Scott leaves, and this guy walks in and is like, oh my god, is that Scott? Was that Scott Hunter? And then Kip looks at his friend Maria, who's in the back, and Kip is jaw drop. So we immediately go, Kip is immediately at this dive sports bar. He's chilling with his friends at the bar. There's Kyle, there's some guy, and there's Maria. I don't remember this guy's name. I think his name's Art or something. And his friends are funny. His friends are genuinely funny. This conversation that they have is something I would generally have with my friends, which is another compliment I have about Heated Rivalry, is that everything in the show feels so real and authentic. Nothing feels of course, so that means they're excellent at their job, but even the love scenes before and just the conversations, it all feels real. But, they're watching hockey. His friends are like, why are we watching this? And then they're talking about him. Kip is like, look, there's Scott. And they're conversating, and Kip is like, obviously he's not gay. And then his friends, like, Maria is like, he blushed, bro, like, come on. Anyways, the episode comes back to the cafe. And Scott walks in, and he's like, oh, whenever I have a routine, like, I want to perfect it. And so now Scott, you know how hockey players have those rituals or whatever. Not hockey players, just sports players in general. Scott is now incorporating this into his routine. Kip makes Scott another smoothie. Scott gives him another big tip, and he's like, you can't keep doing this. And he's like, oh, but I can. See you next game day. We have our Scott Hunter and Kip Ridley, I'm pretty sure that's his name. Shane and Ilya equivalent of see you next season, see you next game day now. And so we cut back to the bar. This is where we meet boss bitch Elena. I love Elena. Oh my god. She is here to serve and nothing else. Her introduction is she walks in there. Kyle is like, no outside food or drink. And Elena is like, fuck off, Kyle. Goes to go sit down. And Emilia is like, Kyle, remote. And Kyle gives her the remote. And then she's there like eating her sushi or whatever in the sports bar. Like, that's the type of like bad bitch we all need to achieve for. And so Elena is talking to Kip about like, oh, like what's going on. And then Elena's like, it's so clear that he's into you. And Kip is like, no, he's not, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so Elena proceeds to be like, oh, when's his next game day? And then he was like, I don't know. He's like, seriously, you don't know his next game day? And Elena proceeds to look it up for him and is like, Saturday. Do you work Saturday? And Kip is like, no, fuck, I don't. Elena is like, fix that. Oh, I felt that in my bones. We all need an Elena in our life. Because Elena's like, you need to plan your shifts around this. And Kip is like, I don't plan my shifts. And Elena's like, well, you gotta start. Anyways, we're back at the cafe. Scott orders another smoothie from Kip, but Kip doesn't let him pay. He's like, this one's on the house. And Scott is like, come on. And then Kip is like, you don't need to tip me, management her, and you keep coming in. And yes, I'm using proper grammar. Scott is like, okay, like, do you mind if I sit over here and answer some emails or whatever? And Kip is like, sure, go for it. So Scott is there, he's answering emails, and still there's more awkward tension. They keep looking at each other, haven't made a move yet. And then Kip starts explaining to Scott starts explaining to Kip, like, tradition or whatever, and how he just took a test to see if he's not a serial killer, because there's, like, a science behind these rituals, and he doesn't want to seem obsessive, but he's not obsessive on a serial killer level, so I guess it's not that bad. And then he brings up stuff like no sex, no shave, like, whatever. And Kip was like, well, I don't mind the no shaving. Y'all look like hot lumberjacks by the end of it. By May, I think he said. And then Scott immediately is like... And then immediately Kip is... You can see on Kip's face where he's like, man, I ruined this. Like, I made it awkward. But I want to say that Scott took this as a moment to be like, okay, so this guy is into me. So Scott invites Kip to his game. He's like, I got 2 seats, no one's taking them. Do you want them? And Kip was like, yeah, sure. And so obviously he brings bestie Elena. Throughout like the practice before the game starts, this is a game where Scott's gonna play against Ilya. And Scott like keeps skating by and keeps looking at Kip and like being like a head nod or like a simple like wave. And Kip was like, ain't no way he just did that. He didn't just do that. And Elena's like, yes, he did that. Yes, he did. Wave back. What are you doing? And so Kip waves back. And so the game goes through. Scott's team ends. And Ilya starts trash talking. And he's like, don't you wish you could play at home every day? And Scott is like, go fuck yourself, Rosenoff. And Ilya is like, it's more fun if you're there. So we get another hint of like, I feel like this is where Scott kind of learned, like, I talked about this in my first episode, where I was like, Scott is picking up on Shane and Ilya. You know, I feel like we're going to lead to I don't know what part it happens in the book. Apparently it happens, I think someone told me it happens way later. But Scott is definitely on to both of them. Shane doesn't know how to play it off to save his life. And I feel like this is where Scott learns that Ilya's like, if you know what I mean. And then we go to the next game. Scott's playing against the Montreal Metros, against Shane, and Scott loses again to Shane. And Shane skates up and is like, hopefully next time you decide to show up. And Scott says something I don't quite remember, and then he spits. And then Shane sees this and spits on the ice too. And then Scott is like, you're starting to sound like him. And Shane is like, what is that supposed to mean? And then Scott is like, you heard me, Hollander. And Shane proceeds to try to fight Scott. My package has been delivered. I'll be right back. Did a quick outfit change, you know, like, just had to. And we can see it, Kip's like watching the game with his dad. And we see Shane be like, come on, you pussy. And then, like, they're having to hold each other back. And then, of course, the whole team starts to fight one another. And that's how that ends. So, Kip says to his dad, like, Kip's dad says he's going to bed. And then Kip is like, oh, I have that catering thing in the morning. And he proceeds to wake up, not able to find his suit. This is also where we see Kip's physique. And Kip is late to the catering thing with his friend Art. And he's like, sorry I'm late. And then Art hands him, like, a platter. And as he's about to go out to serve, he turns around and immediately bumps into Scott. And then the lady Scott is with was just so rude. She proceeds to be like, New York used to have actual waiters, and now it's just models who can't hold a tray. And proceeds to just, like, mock Kip this whole time. But Scott was like, no, it's fine, like, this isn't my only suit. And then they meet eyes and they see who each other is. And then Kip goes to the back and Art is like, what happened? And Kip was like, I'm sorry, like, I know I'm an absolute fuck up. And then his friend, like, calms him down and is like, go and serve this. And so he does. And then he sees Scott from across the room as he's getting drinks. And Scott winks at him. And he's like, and this is where their relationship really starts to build. Kip then they later meet up, like, in the room, and Kip is like, oh, Scott's like, I'm sorry, like, I shouldn't be standing next to a door. And Kip is like, oh, like, it's fine, like, I just turned too quick or whatever. And they both bond over how the lady was really rude. And Scott was like, I hate these. I hate coming to these things. And then Kip was like, I hate working them. And then Scott proceeds to invite Kip to go to this Mexican place, like, across from the venue they're at. And then Kip was like, you'll wait for me? And Scott was like, I will. And Scott does wait at the back for him. And then they realize that there's the longest line ever. And then Scott proceeds to invite Kip to his place. And, you know, they walk in, Kip is amazed by how it looks. And then Scott immediately takes off his shirt and his jacket and just stands there and is like, do you want the tour? Or, and the Kip is like, or. I pick or. And they then start playing Undressed by Somber. It's a really good song, by the way. And Scott is like, wow, you're so beautiful. Kip was like, I can't believe you're into me. And then Scott is like, I'm so into you, I can't stop thinking about you. And then the amount of consent in this show is really beautiful. It shows that, like, it proves that it doesn't take that much to really ask someone if they're okay with what you're doing, because Scott is about to, like, undo his belt, and he looks at Kip, and Kip is like, yeah, and it's not. Scott goes to town. He is clearly experienced at this. They finish, and then Kip is getting ready to leave. Scott is like, what are you doing? And then Kip was like, oh, I figured, like, you have a game in the morning, so I figured I must go. And then Scott calls him over, and Scott is like, can you stay? And Kip was like, yeah. And then Scott is like, then stay, please. So they wake up to the next morning, and then Kip is making Scott a smoothie for his game today. And Kip over apologizes he's like, I'm sorry, like, I didn't want to throw you off, so I made you a smoothie, but I didn't want to go out and buy ingredients, and then, like, I looked in the fridge and I saw that you have everything right here, and I didn't mean to snoop or whatever. And then Scott, like, walks over to him, picks him up, and is like, redwood tree ain't hard to see. And then Scott was like, and the kid was like, absolutely. And then this is where we get another touchy moment where Scott is like, I'm gonna say a bunch of things, okay? And Scott basically explains how he really wants Kip. Scott basically explains that he's never done this. He's never brought anyone back to his apartment. And since the day he saw Kip, he's wanted him so bad. He wants him. He wants him to be there after he gets off from practice. He wants him to be there after he gets back from his game. And how he can't come out yet. Too many people rely on him. And after the season, he maybe wants to fade away, and then they can be together out and about. And this speech is really beautiful. I'm recalling it so terribly, but this is just me giving you motivation to go watch the show and really to hear the speech from myself, because it's coming from someone who knows his true self but isn't ready to express it or doesn't know how to express it. There is a big stigma in the hockey world where everyone has to be straight. There's been players coming out seeing the show and saying, I hope the show motivates people in hockey to come out and to be who they are in real life and on their sport, and to break this stigma. And Scott clearly is a victim of this stigma where he has to be this big, strong, tough, straight man. He's leading his Olympic team, and he has to like suppress this part of himself. Kip was like, yes, like, I'll be here for you. And then we get this cute montage of them having fun and being in the apartment. Literally, like, majority of the time they have together is spent by themselves or in their apartment or in Scott's apartment. You know, superstitious. And then we proceed to get to a point where Kip like made Scott food, and he's like, you made that for me? And Kip was like, I'm more than just a pretty face. And then Scott is asking him what he's looking at, and Kip was like, oh, like my favorite like artist like dropped a bunch of new art. And then Scott was like, I've been needing to buy art for the place. And then Kip was like, art? And then Scott was like, I'm more than just a pretty face too. And Kip was like, yeah, you're also like a hot body. And so they attempt to go on an art date where they just go look and they're going to go buy art or go look at an exhibit. And Scott has a hat on, he's got sunglasses on, and he's very nervous. He's very nervous about being out and about. And so he tries his best. They get to one art exhibit, and Scott like looks away and is trying to look away, and the lady is like, oh, what are we looking at? And Scott runs away. And they end up both going back to the apartment. And then Scott was like, I really thought I could. I really wanted to. I tried. And then Kip was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And then Scott is like, no, it's not fine. I know that. Scott starts crying into Kip's shoulder. And we really learned throughout this, like, I feel like in the first 2 episodes, Scott is portrayed as like this tough, straight guy. And he's really vulnerable. And then Kip goes out and sees these banana socks that are like the color of the smoothie, and they have bananas on them because like that's the one thing that was different about the smoothie. And because in the moment Scott is like packing for a game, and he's like I think I'm cursed. And then Scott's making a joke about like, should I tell you how he makes his smoothies? Like, if you got a smoothie somewhere else. And Kip was like, well, what if I could always be there with you? And gives him the sauce. And then Kip was like, redwood tree. And then Scott's like, absolutely. We're back at the sports bar, and Elena's been new. Like, Elena been new this whole time. Like, it's so obvious. And Kip was like, he's not ready to come out yet. He can't. And this is where Kip really accepts it, like, that he's gonna be a little secret. And But anyways, the next part is Kip and the apartment. Scott's apartment. He's where Scott City as well. And Scott like texts him. He's like, my good luck charm, because he's been doing like really good like outside. He's been doing really good at his away hockey games. And he's like, look in my closet. There's a surprise for you, and it's a suit. And on the letter, like there's a note on the suit, and it's from Scott, and it says, "For my man, S." And so we cut to the little charity event, and Kip is there with Elena, and Scott is there talking to somebody else. And this is where we learn that Scott doesn't have his parents in his life, because he's talking to this guy with his friend, and he's like, your mother would be really proud of you. She would. And then he walks away, and his friend goes up to Scott and he's like, are you okay? And then he's like, I'm fine, like I should be used to it, which is just so sad. So Scott goes up to Kip and Elena and is like, hello there, you look beautiful, y'all both do. And then Scott immediately apologizes for it. And Elena is like, well, if I go get us some drinks, will you promise to start talking, Kip? Well, Christopher, because Kip's real name is Christopher. I don't know how he got that nickname. And he's like, yeah. And so they walk away, and their conversation is really awkward. They don't know how to like talk to each other friendly in a normal environment, or if they're even supposed to be seen with each other. Like Kip is like facing the crowd, and Scott's like facing away. And he's like, how are you enjoying the party? And then Scott is like, I'm looking forward to the after party. Kip proceeds to tell Scott that Elena knows. And then Scott is like, I picked up on that. And his first question is she discreet? Which is crazy. And Kip is like, yeah, like I just had to tell someone. And Scott is like, it's fine. But like you can kind of hear in his voice, like Scott's kind of like a little mad about it. And anyways, we cut to a dance with Elena and Scott. And this is where we get Elena's speech, and he's like, what are my intentions with my kid? And Scott's like, I love him, I really do. And then Elena's like, he's miserable. Are you miserable? And then Scott is like, I'm sorry. And then we get Elena's speech, where it's like, Elena's like, well, because he's a secret. And then Scott is like, I want to, I really do. And then Elena's speech, it really is beautiful too, where Elena is like, he's a secret, and he loves you so much that he'll just accept it, but it shouldn't be like that. And it's a really beautiful speech. I'm recapping it so bad, but Elena is like, he deserves sunshine, and so do you. Basically telling Scott, like, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep doing this to yourself and people you love. Like, it's not good for either one of y'all. Y'all deserve to be happy and to be seen and to be official and to be out there. And literally during this speech, we see Scott get in a limo and then drive to the back to pick up Kip to their apartment. And Kip tries to invite Scott to his birthday, where it's like, he's like, I'm having my birthday here at this bar. Well, it's a sports bar now, because of me, I watch all your games there. And I want you to come as my friend who I just make smoothies for. And then he's like, Marcus knows, Blonde knows, Kyle knows. And then we see Scott's face like start to worry, and Kip realizes that. And Kip is like, that I make smoothies for you. And then Scott is like, I can't do that. I really want to. I want the whole world to know I love you, to know that you're mine. And maybe in a few years we can do that. And then that's where reality finally hits Kip. And Kip is like, well, I should probably go home. Like, I need to go see my dad. And Kip leaves. And that's where we can tell, like, this is the end of their little situationship. Kip goes home. He goes to his dad and starts crying. And he has his birthday. And Scott is standing outside watching. It's very much like the end of the All Too Well short film, and I look in people's windows. And Scott is at the Olympics, and he still wears the socks that Kip got him, but he covers them up with a regular pair of socks. And that's the episode. This truly is, right now in the show, this is the best episode, where we really see how people can love each other so much, but because of how the world is and how reality is that one is too scared to show it, and so it ends up hurting the relationship. Kip and Scott are so madly in love. I'm gonna compare this to Shane and Ilya in a minute. Kip and Scott are so madly in love, but Scott is scared of how the world is gonna look. This episode ends with Scott giving his speech of how, you know, like his parents were killed, and I think in a car accident, and luckily there was a scholarship in hockey to help build him up. Hockey has been there for him. It's his everything, and that's why he loves hockey so much, and he wants to donate, and he has this charity event to make sure that kids have access to this hockey event. Hockey is so important to Scott, and he said before, like, there's people who need him. He doesn't want to ruin that by what he means by ruining it is by people seeing him in a different light. It's something that is not normal, and people are going to turn away from Scott, and Scott's going to lose everything, a foundation that he's built for himself. He wants to keep Kip a secret, and Kip, you can only keep someone a secret for so long until someone doesn't want to play that role anymore. And yeah, this was a little situationship. But you could compare this to Shane and Ilya, where Shane, like Scott, is scared. When Ilya starts making out with him on the balcony, he's like, "What are you doing? We're both in tuxedos. Someone could see us." And Shane asks Ilya, "You're not gonna tell anyone about this, right? Like, don't." And Ilya doesn't really care. He has his own things too. We see in Russia where he stays away from Shane as far as possible, and then goes back to him. And then Shane tries to like ask him about his personal life, and something that Ilya is not comfortable with, and pushes Shane away. We didn't even kiss. And yeah. Now, what do I think is going to become from the next episode? And later in the show, well, we got a still from episode 4. It's like Shane and Ilya laying together in bed, and I predicted that Shane and Ilya were gonna beef in this episode. You know, based on the way it ends and what we see, and you know, they both got each other's girls, and they're at a party, and they're looking at each other, clearly trying to make each other jealous. And then we see Ilya on the phone with someone, clearly looking distraught. And I want to say that maybe they're gonna cross the bridge and then come to each other and accept each other again. And then where I think Scott can play in the show, for right now at least, is maybe Shane and Scott are gonna have a little bonding moment. You know, they both have their boys that they're scared to be out and about with, and I want to say this is going to be like a mentor-protege type moment, because that is really what Scott is to Shane. Scott really is a mentor. But yeah, that's why I think it can come from this. Thank y'all so much for watching. Don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe if you already done so. This is Vlogmas Day 10. I've been doing this for 10 days now, and there have been some bumps in the road. And again, I'm going to have to edit this right now and then post it as soon as possible. Alexa, what time is it?
Good afternoon, Landon. It's 3:57 p.m.
I got work at 6:30, so let's hope this is quick. And yeah, I've done this for 10 days, and there's 15 days left to go. I wrote down a list of episodes I want to make. I'm just going to give y'all like a sneak peek of what is bound to come. I want to talk about, obviously, we're going to do Heated Rivalry episode 4 and 5. That's going to be within the Vlogmas timeline. Episode 6 is going to be its own thing, which it's kind of what I want to spend time on, because it will be the last episode. I want to talk about Taylor Swift more. I want to do a decluttering video. Episode 25, I want to really talk about how this has been for me. We're going to talk about me a little more. We'll talk about Tate McRae. Maybe do a makeup video, because I bought makeup like I want to try, and we'll see how that goes. And yeah, if I can give you a quick rundown, Heated Rivalry episode 4 and 5 Taylor Swift in the 2020s decade, Tate McRae, my favorite albums of 26, some makeup videos, Taylor's re-recordings, Declutter, my Taylor collection, How I Feel, why Tortured Poets Department is Taylor's best album. And yeah, that's a little... Who knows if that will happen, because I had a whole original list that I wrote down that I wanted to do and then I scrapped it. But yeah, like I said, thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye, guys.